So why would a player like Scheffler take out his trusty driving iron that he uses so well and trusts and put in the 7-wood? Now there are a number of other players that put lofted woods in this week. You know, Morikawa going to a 9-wood, Fleetwood putting the 9-wood back in. And we've seen this at similar kind of course setups. Torrey Pines earlier in the year, a lot of players put in the lofted woods. And there are similarities between the courses. So both have thick rough. Now it rained heavily at the beginning of the week at Quail Hollow. And what that did is really juiced up the rough, made it really even thicker, even heavier. So getting the ball up and out of it, getting it launched quickly. Lofted wood's going to do that better than a long iron. But also think about the course. It's a long golf course, and with the sub-air system in the greens, they can suck the moisture out of the greens, which, as we saw at the weekend, as it sort of dried out naturally as well with the sun coming out, they started to get really firm and baked out. So what's important when you go into those kind of greens? Height. What does a fairway give you versus a driving iron? Height. So whether it's off the fairway or out of the rough, I mean, going back to the rough, we saw some of the, these guys are big and strong and actually really struggled to get it any distance out the rough. It was either chop it out or they got a flyer and it went miles. Tony Finau hitting a 9-iron 209 onto the 9th green. Great, but even seeing Scheffler really have to hack at it to get out of the grass and move it 150 yards up the fairway. That was quite revealing as to why a club like this is so much more useful than the driving iron. But what we're going to do, we're going to use the approach shot into the 7th green, the par 5, and look at what flight do we get out of the 3-iron, what flight do we get out of the 7-wood. These are both at a 21-degree loft, and why was that important for them this week? But how can you utilise that in your game as well? So going to start off hitting the 3-iron. So we've got it at a relevant yardage for me, 215 yards carry. I'm going to see how, really looking at flight height, spin rates, land angles, what it does when it lands as well, is to explain why the players went into that 7-wood or the lofted woods for this week. So it's a nice, comfortable yardage. I haven't got to thrash at it. So we're going to hit a couple of shots. It might take me a few shots to get the actual to hit the green, because it's not an easy shot. And then we'll look at where the numbers sit. We can talk about the differences and how to utilise that. So start with the 3-iron here. Okay, so hit well. Going a little bit right, but going towards the green, nice hit. I've really picked that up nicely. So it's actually got a reasonable bit of height for the 3-iron. I've got to get that really well though, to get this sort of flight numbers. I've managed to get 4,000 spin. We've got up to 35 yards, land angle, 46 degrees. So there's a decent bit of height there, and that one managed to hold the green. If I bring that flight, if I don't quite hoist that up, I'm going to bring that flight down a little bit now. So I didn't really try to get it as elevated as possible. But if this comes out a little bit flatter, we'll see quite a different result. That last one did hold the green. So sent that in a little bit flatter. So on a similar line, still struck well, still carrying to the green, but that now hits, and that's now feeding towards the back edge. And we saw this a few times in the tournament where they'd pitch, particularly 17th, pitch pin high, Rahm in the last round, pitch pin high, and that's gone in the water. So this one we're down at 3,500 revs of spin. 40 land angle, so we've taken 15% of the land angle off, and 28 yards flight height. Now that's got to have quite a lot of green to stay on there. And this is a big green, but I've got to work the ball flight. I've got to force the flight up in the air. This is off a perfect lie on a mat. You get a slightly iffy lie in the fairway, or if you're not in the fairway in the semi-rough, it's hard to hoist that up. So what kind of numbers do we get off the 7-wood? Now that one launched at 13 degrees as well. I think about 14.5 on the previous shot. So I'm going to switch to the 7-wood and see how that changes the numbers. So one of the other numbers that would be interesting with this as well, we get the height, there's going to be ball speed. Now we've got a lighter club, a longer club, face has got a little bit more pop off it as well. So where I've got to get the 3-iron perfectly, I don't have to nail this to get it to the green. We're already going to have a little bit more ball speed. But how does that translate into the shot type itself? So I can put just a nice, neutral, smooth swing on. Didn't quite strike it, but we can get away with it. I've actually just tugged that a little bit left. So, not a great strike. Came up a little bit shy. The irony that I ripped the first 2-iron shots straight out the gate. But, with that shot, 40 yards flight height, 5.7 spin, got a bit heely, 52 land angle. So that gives an insight into what value the 7-wood brings as long as you hit it out the middle. Yeah, a little bit of a more solid contact there. So again, this one's heading at the green. Should see when it comes down, you know, that's coming down, and there's not an awful lot of run out of that. So from a numbers point of view, we're then seeing, yeah, 42 yards flight height, but 4,380 on spin, 4.4 on spin. So we've got 10% more spin, another couple of yards flight height, best part of 50-degree land angle. So what that means is coming to this kind of green, I'm using height, you know, ball speed at 140 miles an hour. We've got more ball speed, we've got more height, we've got more spin. So that's trying to hold on and really kind of stick into the green without me having to force it. I haven't got to work it. I'm getting all this height without really having to do anything about it. If I really want to hoist it up, you know, if you want to say, right, I want to get a bit more flight on this, you know, see how high we can actually get it to. Now I'm not, you know, I'm trying to hoist this up, so might miss it short right, we shall see. But this has really got some hang time. So it's come down, land on the front of the green, but again, looking at the height and the numbers side of it, you know, we've now seen 5.3 on spin. I got another 1,000 revs of spin, 48 yards flight height, got another 6 yards of flight height. That's landing at 55 degrees. That's almost as steep. That's about where my 7-iron is, maybe even close to an 8. So, you know, you can really start to kick, you know, 19-degree launch angle, really start to kick this club up in the air and get lots of spin and get it coming in like a mid-iron. If I go back to the 3-iron, I'm going to really try and kick this up in the air as much as possible. You know, the fairway wood, the design of the head, you can pick it off, the weight's sat low, I can get into the bottom of the ball and flight that up. You know, it's given me that towering ball flight that for this kind of shot means I can fly it there and hold it. If I really try and get this up fast, so one, I've got to sit back underneath it, risk a fat shot. It's got a little bit more shot. Because I've got to work my swing more, start to lose a little bit more dispersion. So there's definitely that risk of catching the mat. Now I've got that up. We've got 19 launch angle there, but ball speed's down by about 7 miles an hour. So we're 5 yards lower flight height. The spin's under 4,000. You know, it's coming in at 50, which is pretty good land angle, but we've got 1,400 revs less spin. So for this kind of scenario, what the lofted wood does, or potentially a hybrid, but for the players playing this tournament last week, it's the spin and the flight you naturally get out of the lofted wood versus the driving iron, which is why they put those in the bag. So we've seen what the impacts are on flight, height, spin rate of these two clubs, but what does that really mean to you around where you play? So for a lot of the viewers in the UK, you know, the 7-wood and really hoisting it up, you know, certain course styles, maybe the London Club, the Wisley, Wentworth, you know, bigger courses, water hazards, which are fewer over here. The lofted wood versus the long iron, you know, it may get a little too high. That kind of height and spin, if we get wind conditions, you're certainly not playing that if you're on the coastline and playing heavy wind. But if you're going playing an inland course with, you know, water hazards or carries to make, or longer courses where the carry distance is really key, that height can really help you with those. Whereas, you know, go down to, you know, links course, so at the Open in a few months' time, Portrush, they're all going to be sticking the driving iron in because it's down and forwards. But some of the shorter, tighter heathland courses we get here, that's then when the driving iron, for kind of putting it in play off the tee and accuracy, that can then start to pay dividends around that kind of course where you're not necessarily using this into a green. You know, to flip that over into the US, where I know we've got a lot of viewers, you know, a lot of the course styles in the US are a little bit more carry based. So, you know, the lofted wood, you know, particularly out of a slightly iffy lie, kind of sat down line, a semi-rough, that's going to get the ball up and flighted and get you carry distance far, far more easily than a long iron will. So really, you're looking at the course you're playing, the type of shots. If you've got long par 3s with bunkers short, you've got to stick it up in the air and land it soft, straight into a lofted wood or a hybrid to get that elevation and spin. If you're playing, you know, Texas, or kind of more of a kind of a seaside course where actually high flight and soft landings not as important, and actually either putting it in play or having a kind of a low driving flight into there, then the long iron suits that shot a little bit more. So you're looking at pitch of flight, they're both carrying very, very similar yardages for me. So when you've got that kind of choice of which club do I use, if you want height stopping power, it's a 7-wood. If you want maybe kind of slightly more accurate, but of a little bit of a lower shot and a bit of run out, go into the driving iron. But ultimately, what do you use most consistently? Try them out, make sure you're seeing what results you're getting, and pick the one that suits your game, your consistency, but the course you play most often, and put that in the bag for your sort of standard gamer set.